I want to talk about Puerto Rico. 3.5 million American citizens, and I underline that, American citizens who have fought in our armed forces in just about every conflict this country has had for the last century. And if you come take a walk with me to the Vietnam War, you will see a disproportionate number of their names on that wall. Now, due to a multitude of issues, the American citizens living in the island of Puerto Rico are now in dire straits. They have an economic and debt crisis that threatens to explode into a full-force humanitarian calamity. And that's not politics. That's the reality on the island. It is the reality that I hear from many Puerto Ricans living in the state of New Jersey who have loved ones there who tell me about their challenges of their families on the island. Now, there are those who contend that Puerto Rico shouldn't be able to restructure its debt, even though they had that right in the law at one time, and it was surreptitiously stripped out, and no one knows why, but they had that right. And instead that they should simply raise taxes and cut spending to a degree to get their books in order. The problem with that is that the debt payments in Puerto Rico are 36% of Puerto Rico's annual revenue, a rate that is 6 times the U.S. average. So it seems that any solution that doesn't include restructuring authority will be woefully inadequate. And, you know, I know some people say this is being politicized. I think it's being politicized for the hedge funds, the bottom feeders who bought cheap and now want to maximize their profits. That has nothing to do with the 3.5 million American citizens in Puerto Rico. And it has nothing to do with the exodus that we are seeing of Puerto Ricans coming to the mainland, where they will enjoy all the rights and responsibilities of any other U.S. citizen, which, by the way, will be far more costly. So I want to get from the administration on the record to make this clear. And in fact, if Puerto Rico didn't have to make its debt payments, it would actually run $1 billion surplus this year, $1 billion surplus. So do you agree that providing Puerto Rico with the tools to restructure the debt is a necessary component of any successful recovery package?
Senator, I totally agree. I think there are other things that need to be part of a comprehensive plan in the long run, but there is an immediate crisis in Puerto Rico. I was just in Puerto Rico a couple weeks ago. I met with business leaders, I met with working people, I met with all the public officials. It's not a future crisis, it's a current crisis. They talk about hospital wards being shut down, schools being closed, pensions that are being drained of money, people paying into pension funds that are being emptied out to pay for bond payments. This is not sustainable. People are leaving the island, and the economy can't recover if the economy shrinks because people leave. When you're insolvent, it is by definition what you said. Your bond payments just cannot be supported any longer, and you have to restructure. That's what happens in the private sector when companies become insolvent. It happens when cities become insolvent. Puerto Rico has a unique package of debts. It's complicated. There's 18 different series of debt. They could be in court for 5 to 10 years with litigation. I don't think Puerto Rico's economy could recover from 5 to 10 years of protracted litigation. There won't be an economy to talk about. And
so if it was good enough,
if
it was good enough for Trump, it's good enough for the people of Puerto Rico.
Well, I'm going to leave the comparisons to others, but I do think that 3.5 million Americans who are going to be in chaos if Congress doesn't.
Let me ask you this very briefly. There's the Chapter 9 authority open to municipalities. That really doesn't meet.
It doesn't really work. It doesn't address about a third of the debt, and that's not.
And with large debt payments due in May and July, isn't there going to be a point where we will face the consequences if we continue to delay and act?
Yeah, you know, they have only managed to be in default on small bond issues by doing things that are almost unthinkable in terms of financial management. I mean, when you talk about prematurely emptying out pension funds to pay bondholders, that is not something you do if you're not already bankrupt. When you talk about taking money that's dedicated to one bondholder and shift it to pay another bondholder, that can't go on for very long. So I can't tell you at what point they run out of those extraordinary and very unhealthy kinds of tools. But it can't go on forever. And restructuring authority has to be in place enough in advance that they can actually restructure to meet May and July as they come. So I think the first quarter is a meaningful period. If the deadline the Speaker set for the House to act in the first quarter is very important, we are willing to work with anyone and everyone who approaches this with the intention of solving the problem. We know that there's going to have to be oversight along with restructuring. I do believe that doing something on the Medicaid reimbursement and EITC is important, but I totally agree with you. Without restructuring, there's not a solution.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there is a fierce urgency of now on this issue. And I just don't get the sense that many of my colleagues understand that. And I hope we can awaken them to that fierce urgency of now and the rights that 3.5 million American citizens have and would have if they were living here in the United States. It's just fundamentally wrong. And so you ask people to don the uniform, shed their blood, risk their lives, and at the same time you can't treat them with the same dignity and respect that they would have here on the mainland. Something is fundamentally wrong about that. And I hope we can prick the conscience of the Senate to move on this issue, Mr. Chairman, because this is really consequential to millions of people.
You raise a lot of good points, and to be honest with you, we're in the process of doing that. I'm going to come up with a different bill than the one we filed, which would do the job to a large degree, or at least get us started on it in time to do it even more thoroughly. So I hope I can enlist your support when we finally get this. There's no politics as far as I'm concerned. I want to get it done. And I'll do my...
Mr. Chairman, you'll have my support if at the end of the day what we are going to do is give the people of Puerto Rico the same opportunity that any United States citizen has here. So I'm happy to work with the chairman towards that goal. I just have a real fierce sense of urgency, and I can't elaborate on that enough to drive that point home. But I appreciate the chair's
I'm trying to get this done before the end of March, and we'll sure see what we can do. Senator Brown, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to throw in with the words of Senator Menendez about the 3.5 million citizens in Puerto Rico, again, emphasizing these are American citizens and that this should be done quickly, and the fierce urgency of now that Senator Menendez talked about it.